Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Robin Wansley and I am the chair of the Administration and Enterprise Oversight Committee. I am going to call to order our regular scheduled meeting for today, Monday, November 4th, 2024. But before we begin today's meeting, I do want to offer a friendly reminder to all committee members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcasted live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask that all speakers moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. And with that, I will now ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Vita.
Present.
Ellison.
Here.
Cashman is absent. Vice President Chuktai.
Present.
Vice Chair Palmisano.
Present.
Chair Wansley.
Present.
We have 5 present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. I will also remind colleagues that we should be using speaker management today, but my computer decided to give out, so I'm going to use the old school system of tags, and then I'll also ask for the support of my vice chair, Palmisano. If anyone gets in queue through speaker management, I'll keep tabs through consulting with her. So with that, we do have 21 items on the consent agenda, which I will now read for the record. First, we have a gift acceptance from the International Association of Emergency Managers, Travel, Lodging, and Per Diem. Number 2, we have a gift acceptance from Kelber Catering, cost of refreshments. Number 3 is a gift acceptance from the Doherty Foundation, travel, lodging, and per diem expenses. Number 4 is a 2024 property tax special assessment of delinquent utility charges. Number 5, we have a legislative directive for public safety capital projects. And I will note that I do have an amendment to this directive, adding a bullet point requesting information on how any public safety capital projects proposals will align with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights settlement agreement and ways alignments could be improved. This amendment comes from consultation and conversation with the administration this morning. And then number 6 is a bid for Convention Center Concessions 136 remodel. 7 is a bid for Phillips Traffic Safety Project. 8 is a bid for the 30th Avenue South Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project. Number 9 is a bid for 3000 Minnehaha Avenue Fire Remediation and Cleanup Project. Number 10 is a bid for 3000 Minnehaha Avenue Building Improvement Project. 11 is a bid for the Fulton Residential ADA Pedestrian Ramp Improvements. Number 12 is a contract amendment with Variant Americas, Inc. for the 311 Lagan system. 13 is contracts with selected firms for the Bond Council Services Panel. 14 is a State of Minnesota grant for Minneapolis Fire Department Training Apparatus Expansion Project. 15 is a contract with Hagen, Christensen, and McWayne Architects for Architectural and Engineering Design Services for the Fire Department Training Apparatus Expansion Project. Number 16 is a lease amendment with Minneapolis Public Schools for space 4131 DuPont Avenue North. Number 17 is a legal settlement, Martin, Austin, and Ogantega v. City of Minneapolis et al. Number 18 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim of Michael Nielsen. 19 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim of Paul Delwell. 20 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim of Isabel Marino. Number 21 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim of Andrew Peterson. With that said, is there any discussions on these items? I see Vice Chair Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see others in the electronic queue, but I wanted to add some comments, though I don't need to pull it. Item number 16, the lease amendment with Minneapolis Public Schools for the 42nd and DuPont space, if I may. I need to point out that I've been working for over 7 years to move us forward to a new public safety training and wellness facility. And it's incredibly disappointing that here we are, again, renewing a lease for a training facility that does not meet our needs, years after already working on it. MDHR determined a need for third-party audits in many things during the settlement agreement. One of them was our facilities. There was also an audit of our training and health and wellness, all of which I've been trying to make sure would be included in a revamped facility. So I am very grateful that Mr. Hannon, who's here in the room today, recognized in his RCA that this is not a long-term solution. And I understand that we've got to renew this lease for at least another few years until we do have a permanent solution. We have funding in the mayor's recommended 2025 CIP budget of $500,000 to begin planning. So let's begin planning. I've had conversations with OCS about the importance of picking a site for this facility. It's really important to note that we need to have pre-design and an address in order to go to the state to ask for bonding money. That allows us to pursue outside partnerships with other municipalities as well as make a capital bonding request, just to be clear. Starting in 2026 and through 2028, we have $21.5 million recommended by the mayor in the CIP budget. We've got the financial part of things planned out, maybe not fully agreed on, but planned out, but we have to get this started. I do not want to sit here 3 years from now at the end of this lease extension and have someone tell me that we aren't ready. I will not do this again. We need to start being ready now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Palmisano. And I'll just quickly note in the legislative directive that I'm bringing forward that asks for a report back from the administration on our public safety capital projects. We do ask for additional details pertaining to that center, also known as, I believe, PSC 23 in the capital improvement program report. So hopefully we can get some additional details come next year about that project with a separate roll call vote if the clerks can proceed.
On items 18 and 19, Councilmember Vita.
Aye.
Allison. Aye. Council Vice President Chuktai.
Nay.
Vice Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
Chair Wansley.
Nay.
We have 3 ayes and 2 nays.
All right, that motion carries. Next, we do have 5 discussion items today, with the first 3 being updates from the administration in regards to their responses to several legislative directives adopted related to the neighborhood safety departments, specifically their violence prevention contracts, and then the police department protest response. The first 2 legislative directives, actually all 3 were due with the staff presentation to this committee back in October. Clearly it's November 4th, so none of those presentations happened. And as the chair of this committee, I do want to ensure that the public receives an update on the status of these directives. In addition to public transparency, this is also part of how we uphold the standards listed in our legislative directive policy around the expectation that the administration does present at the approved timeline, even if it needs to be an initial or partial presentation with a subsequent update later on. So with that, item number 22, which is the Neighborhood Safety Department Management's Updates Legislative Directive. This is a directive that both I and Council President Payne authored back in September in response to ongoing concerns about the management of the Neighborhood Safety Department. And as the oversight body of the city, we do need updates on how the administration is addressing these concerns. And I do want to note that the management practices of this department has also caused some public doubt about the efficacy of violence prevention work overall. And I do want to make it clear to the public that the current management or lack thereof of NSD or the Office of Community Safety, and NSD is the Neighborhood Safety Department. That should not be seen as a reflection of violence prevention work as a legitimate and effective practice. Violence prevention efforts are being used all across the country with documented impacts on reducing violence and crime when it is implemented correctly. I also want to highlight that violence prevention professionals who are contracted out through the Neighborhood Safety Department are working hard every single day using their expertise to de-escalate conflict. And the management challenges that currently exist within the Neighborhood Safety Department should not reflect on the incredibly important and difficult work that is being carried out by these contractors who are delivering both quality and evidence-based services on the ground. So with that, I will invite the Office of Community Safety up forward to see if there's any updates on this particular legislative directive. With that, I see Jared Jeffries approaching.
Good afternoon, Chair Wansley, Vice Chair Palmisano, members of the committee. As Chair Wansley said, I am Jared Jeffries. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Office of Community Safety, and here to speak to discussion items 22, 23, and 24. I will address them collectively, then happy to stand for questions individually on those two. As just an initial note up front, the administration will be responding to all three of those legislative directives referenced in those individual items. I think what is in question here is the time frame in which relevant departments for each one can respond with the depth requested. All administration offices, departments always welcome the opportunity to meet with any and all council members on legislative directives prior to them coming forward so that we can first and foremost understand what's being requested and advise in that respect. And then also to provide feasible timelines for returns considering the overall office and departmental workloads. Leaders across the administration always want to make sure the information provided is correct and thorough, which can often take time when also balanced alongside the city's day-to-day work. For all three of these agenda items, I'll note that the Office of Community Safety nor the specific affected departments were able to weigh in regarding the content of these legislative directives or the possible timing for returning responses. As Chair Wansley stated, these came forward a few months ago. For items 22 and 23 specifically, I was able to attend the agenda setting prior to that AEO committee meeting and flagged that we had not had the opportunity to review and weigh in on those legislative directives for content or timing, and that upon seeing the directives for the first time, we had concerns that the requested turnaround for both of those were going to be challenging, considering that departments' offices were preparing for budget presentations, other presentations before council, and several new on-staff onboarding in addition to other time-sensitive deadlines to balance before the end of the year. With that said, we estimate the administration will be able to respond to the legislative directive referenced in item number 22, which is titled Neighborhood Safety Department Management Updates, by the last AEO meeting of this year on Monday, November 18th. We are still gathering information and do not yet have ETAs on the other two, as offices and departments are still working diligently towards those year-end timelines. Again, administration very much welcomes the opportunity to proactively discuss content and timing with all council members for any legislative directive, and we hope that we can collaborate on these more going forward. With that, happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jared. I will offer just some additional context to items 22. Well, actually, all three. So first, item 2022, which requests updates regarding the management of Neighborhood Safety Department, and I'm more than happy to provide the emails correspondence about this item to attach to LIMS to the clerks after this meeting. But this is a byproduct over several meetings starting all the way in January of this year, going through the spring, where we discussed directly with the administration a variety of concerns around the mismanagement of the Neighborhood Safety Department. And based off of those meetings and the answers that, or questions that were left unanswered, we tried or attempted and by we, my office attempted to work with the Office of Community Safety, reached out to Commissioner Barnett multiple times asking if they can give responses to those unanswered questions as early of this summer. We sent several dates to the Office of Community Safety, specifically Commissioner Barnett. I believe you were CC on that, Jared Jeffries, around when could they come to committee and talk about these dynamics. We received no response. And as I mentioned in September, and I believe this was articulated by Council President Payne too, that if those questions were not going to receive a response formally from the Office of Community Safety through these meetings that we were having, then we would resort to taking a legislative directive so we could get those questions answered. So hence how we're here after making several attempts to get this information. Second, in regards to the procurement practices for violence prevention contracts, this is information that should have been readily available, especially since we had our national partners come to the Public Health and Safety Committee in July, who named best practices, and several of which were in contract with Neighborhood Safety Department, who offered their services to provide responses to questions around our procurement practices. And I do want to name, this is relatively important information to have because there's this ongoing scrutiny around, are we being intentional when it comes to our procurement practices, especially after last cycle when we took up an item that brought particular scrutiny around how are we handling the administration of violence prevention contractors, and are those contracts being administered using national best standards or any type of standards that aligns with violence prevention work. So we wanted to ensure, in response to that type of scrutiny, but also the fact that we've heard directly from our contractors through NSD that the procurement process is just horrible and has been challenging for them. They have gone unpaid several times throughout this year where council has had to come in and intervene and ask what's going on and try to help reinstate funding in ways that was already guaranteed through their contracts. We wanted to make sure that maybe there's something missing in our current procurement practices. And now that we have these technical assistance contractors who are ready and willing to provide their subject matter expertise on this, that we could revisit it and make sure that we are taking that intentional evidence-based approach towards our procurement processes as it pertains to our violence prevention contracts. So this is what that legislative directive was based on. And then in regards to the police department protest response legislative directive, this is a legislative directive where we inquired from MPD around their staffing, resource deployment, and their overall conduct, how that basically took place at a protest that happened earlier this summer in June of this year. And similar, we reached out to MPD. Also, residents reached out directly to MPD to inquire about these things. And we received no response and was told to simply do a data request. So that led us to during this legislative directive. And last week, there was lots of conversation on this body and amongst the public about the ways in which MPD had shortcomings as it dealt with Davis Maturi's case. And there's a lot of conversation around, okay, what is going on? Are there other shortcomings as it pertains to, some of the inequitable practices that are listed in the MDHR investigative report? We want to make sure we're not replicating that. So this is an opportunity for MPD to provide responses around how they showed up at that protest to support public transparency and also to support good community engagement efforts from a good faith approach. So we're really hopeful that MPD will see this as a good opportunity and provide those responses. So I would hope to have just outside of a TBD for those last legislative directives relatively soon. So thank you so much, Jared Jeffries, for that update on those respective three. And with that, I will ask the clerks to file those updates. Thank you so much. And next, our item that we're going to take up for discussion is a presentation from the City Auditor's Policy and Research Division on the landscape of information governance and surveillance technologies. This presentation is a response to a staff direction passed by this committee at our May 13th, 2024 meeting. So I will now invite our director of this division, Andrew Hawkins, to give or start the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Wansley, Vice Chair Palmisano, and members of the committee. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, I'm back. I feel like this is becoming a bi-weekly occurrence, so hopefully you're not sick of me yet. But as was stated, I'm here to talk to you about information governance and surveillance technology. This report attempted to look at some of the national best practice recommendations from a number of institutions that do work in the field. It also selected a number of examples from cities to both demonstrate effective practices, but also where there might be some challenges to this work. With that, we can jump into it. Again, just to highlight the importance of this topic, I think this is one of the main issues that cities are currently in the midst of dealing with. A lot of the issues with information governance and kind of oversight stems from the fact that technology itself continues to evolve at a fairly substantial rate, and because of that evolution, there's more and more opportunities for government to procure, whether it's new systems, new devices, whatever it might be. But then the other side of that coin is that, adopting the policy documentation, the oversight structures that are necessary, and just, kind of the governance side of that equation struggles to keep pace with the rate that technology is expanding and being adopted. The G20 Global City Smart Alliance had done a survey of, I believe it was 36 cities. They identified as kind of their pioneer cities. So these were cities that were, again, very active in this area that have been working to kind of become the examples nationally. The survey focused on 5 benchmark areas: IT accessibility in public procurement, privacy assessments, accountability for cybersecurity, the DIG once for digital infrastructure benchmark, and then open data. Of this 36 that, again, identified into this kind of pioneer cities group, only 2 had policies implemented in all 5 categories, and then only 1 had documented formal policies in each of the 5 categories. So again, I start with this just to sort of underscore that even the cities trying to be at the forefront of this are struggling to keep up with that kind of governance and documentation side. Just to touch on our local examples and regulations, there's a lot that Minneapolis is already doing and a lot that they've already done to document policies in certain areas, which again is definitely a good start, as you saw in the previous slide. I mean, there's cities that are, but this is still incredibly new. At least in city Minneapolis, I've documented a number of just kind of examples. This list is by no means exhaustive, but from a council action or reports given to council, we've done information governance like policy ordinances, privacy and security of data ordinance, surveillance ordinance, police misconduct and public data. And again, there were a couple, like the information governance policy stuff has come through a number of times. So the reason I wanted to highlight that is because, again, this is kind of an ongoing thing where if you can lose, it's pretty easy to lose sight of it just with the rate that this stuff is evolving. So it's always good that this is coming back on a continuous basis. In 2018, there was a state of data report given to council that just highlighted the types of data that were being collected, the types of systems of record that were being used to kind of provide an insight into that landscape. And then one that's going to become relevant in the surveillance section, MPD provided a presentation on the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. Following the council action, we have just documentation by MPD itself in the policy manual that pertains to the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, public safety camera platforms, employee cell phones and recording devices, and body-worn cameras. Right now, again, because of this kind of this lag that exists with the need to document and create sort of governance and policy documentation to oversee a city structure, a lot of cities are deferring to state and national guidance. The state of Minnesota does have a number of fairly robust data governance and oversight statutes and policies. Again, similar to the previous slide, this list is not going to be exhaustive, but I just wanted to highlight some of the areas that would touch on things of this nature, such as one that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, but the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, which is one of the more robust like data governance statutes nationally. It goes into data practices, what defines official records, what defines government records, the use of law enforcement data with specific note of surveillance data, and then it also has a section on the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, how that data is classified, policies that are required, and the reporting requirements under that. It's because of these reporting requirements that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at the state level requires reports to be provided from any law enforcement agency that's using technology that qualifies under the state statute. It then compiles a report that's given to the legislature every year that shows the various jurisdictions that are using surveillance technology and a number of items related to that, including deployments, warrant status, program cost, and the purpose for the deployment of the UAV. Just to touch on, MPD was more recently added to this list starting in 2022 with a program cost of $62,000. There were 2 uses where a warrant was not required. In 2023, the cost of the program did go up to $97,000 with 63 uses where a warrant was not required. Of that 63, the primary usage categories as outlined for these in the following table with the reason codes listed. There were 33 uses where it was the aftermath of an emergency situation that involved risk of death or bodily harm. And then there were 25 uses that were conducted for crash reconstruction. Moving on into IT systems and surveillance technology, looking at the acquisition, implementation, and oversight. We looked at, I looked at from the Harvard Government Performance Lab. They had done a 4-part series on transforming IT procurement with the idea of streamlining this process at the local government level. They kind of broke this out into 4 different parts. Each of the parts, again, in the presentation are linked if anybody wants to review them in their entirety. But just to highlight, part 1 was framing the problem. This looks at the development of a problem statement. So essentially, if we're looking at adopting a new technology, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it just that it's a new technology and it's better? Or is it that there's some fundamental flaw in what we're currently using that could be remedied by this? In addition to the problem statement, it talks about goal and outcome statements. These serve multiple purposes. One of them is to help with the contractors who might be putting in a bid to understand what the city is trying to accomplish, other than just adopting the use of newer technology. But it also creates a little, I think, more transparency and accountability on the side of the city by outlining what our intended goal is. So here's the problem, and here's what we'd like to adopt, and here's what we're hoping to get out of it. Part 2 was understanding the marketplace. This, again, is going to be a common theme with this. The fact that technology evolves so quickly, often the procurement process, especially the government procurement process, can take, it can take an amount of time that by the time you get to the end of it, the technology's already moved past. So we're not actually able to understand what was available. So I think that one is taking the time on the front end to identify what the marketplace for what you're looking for looks like. Are there any avenues for procurement that can be used? To kind of retain that agility and flexibility that might be necessary to ensure that you're keeping up with the development of whatever technology it might be. Writing the RFP, so it's pretty straightforward, but it identifies a number of steps and just underscores the importance of kind of creating a very detailed RFP that lists out all of the potential uses for the technology, what it needs to do, what the expectations are for a vendor, for the system, and things of that nature. And finally, with part 4, achieving your contract goals. Well, a lot of times the focus will be placed on parts 1 through 3 because that can often take the longest. Once the actual contract's awarded, then I think being able to figure out how you actually achieve what the goals of the contract were is fairly important. And so that's something that needs to be baked into this process, before you kind of, but before getting to the end where, you've awarded the contract and now all of a sudden you need to go back and figure out how you're going to actually evaluate, whether or not what you've acquired is going to be, how it's going to be implemented, how we'll measure it, how will it be successful. Moving into surveillance technology. The Being Watched report came from the University of Texas Technology and Information Policy Institute. They had looked at this over a number of years and intended to identify 4 analytical frameworks to support the successful adoption and implementation of surveillance technology at various levels of government. These broke down into functional analysis, which, again, it's fairly straightforward, but just a listing of functions and activities that require the usage of the various types of technology. So being very clear and deliberate about why, where, why, how, certain surveillance technologies are being used. Next, it was the stakeholder analysis. This one can include either partners in the procurement, the acquisition, the deployment, but also impacted communities. So, as with anything, deploying technology in a certain area is going to impact the community that it's implemented in. So this step essentially puts in that analytical framework to identify what the impact is going to be, whether intended or unintended. And then finally, it helps to identify the needs of each group that's involved. So that can be both partners, but also from community, to ensure that there's a better understanding for what everybody wants to see out of the implementation of a specific technology. The risk mitigation analysis, this has two components. One of them is just the impact on civil rights and civil liberties of people that are going to be impacted by the implementation of a surveillance technology. And then the other side of that would be the need for access. So as with a lot of technology-related items, there's always a need for transparency. So identifying what, again, this would be under state law, local, like governance, what data is able to be shared and what data is not able to be shared, and then what will be the mechanism that allows for the sharing of that data with the public. And then lastly, the data lifecycle analysis, which is basically just trying to document to the best you can the different types of data that are going to be collected by any one technology, and what the life cycle looks like. So what's the retention schedule for a certain data category that's collected, and then what happens to that, who can request it, what's public, what's not, and so just so that there's a solid accounting for the various things that are going to be part of a technology's use. Another group, I guess, batch of research and articles that was looked at came from the ACLU. It's their community control over police surveillance campaign. Currently, the recommendations from CCOPS have been adopted by, I believe, just a bit over 20 cities nationally. But the goal of this effort is to ensure that local residents, through their city council representatives, are empowered to decide if and how surveillance technologies are used. A goal it achieves by maximizing the public's influence over those decisions. So, at its core, it's very much a transparency effort with the idea that the transparency will drive accountability. Some of the recommendations that come from what's being put out by the CCOPS campaign are city council approval for is mandatory for surveillance technology funding, acquisition, or use, surveillance impact reporting, and surveillance use policy submissions, annual reporting and usage, including publicly available reports, and underscoring the role or potential exploration of roles of advisory groups in a city's surveillance technology process. Looking at municipal examples of data governance and surveillance technology oversight, the following are just going to pull from a range of cities nationally to kind of highlight some of the efforts that are being taken right now. Some of them are good, and some of them serve as kind of guidance for where things can go wrong. San Francisco. So again, they have a specific surveillance technology ordinance and also require impact reports and applicable policies are all documented annually. They have extremely robust, it's linked in the report and the presentation, inventory of their surveillance technology, both in terms of the city database that outlines every single surveillance technology from every single department in the city, but also the annual report. So you can go and look at every single report that's been issued during the course of the year. They also have their OCA technology purchasing handbook, which serves as a guide for departments in the city that are looking to procure, again, qualifying types of technology. Portland, Oregon. Portland highlights the challenges of effective governance and oversight. Again, I highlighted a couple of articles. There's definitely more out there, but where they were recognized nationally for some of their efforts that were kind of on the front end of efforts to centralize how this was done and streamline a process where the city went about things in a consistent manner. However, the Portland City Auditor just released a report. When I say just, I believe it came out last week. So this is very much happening in real time. That found a number of problems where, again, I think well-intentioned in nature. Some of the changes that Portland made, they, again, weren't followed up on or weren't monitored effectively, and it actually was leading to a more challenging procurement process that delayed a number of projects and technology that was being sought after. One of the biggest things was, again, when you have a lot of groups that are trying to procure again, continually evolving technologies. It's hard to keep up. The Bureau of Technology Services was intended to kind of be the one-stop for governance for all of that, but what ended up happening was essentially kind of flipped, and because of the lift that required, the purchases were pretty much being run out of each individual bureau, and then funneling back up on the back end. So like that intended front-end accountability wasn't really happening. They also lacked documentation for their requirements to utilize historically disadvantaged businesses. Then there were a number of issues that stemmed from being inconsistent with their language accessibility, and then some of the city technologies that were intended to be transparent and provide more insight to members of the public were not accessible to people with disabilities. In 2023, Dallas, Texas was awarded a Smart 50 award by Smart Cities Connect. Dallas had implemented, as you can see in the attached picture, which also, if you click on it, I believe links to the report itself, the Smart Dallas Roadmap. This attempted to connect technology and procurement with citywide planning efforts and created a number of domain goal categories. Smart mobility, this has to do with things that pertain to the transportation infrastructure and transit itself. Smart infrastructure focused on energy and water efficiencies, so systems and technology that are being procured to help support increased efficiencies in how the city uses its energy grid and water resources. Smart environment, this was things stemming from the creation and maintenance of healthy environments and quality of life for Dallas residents. Smart public safety, this one pertained to, again, law enforcement and public safety entities. And smart government, so how could technology be leveraged to increase the efficiencies in the provision of service and government transparency efforts? With this one, I also want to highlight that despite all of these advancements, they're not without criticism. The Connect Dallas program stemmed from the Dallas Police Department partnering with a number of local agencies and residents to basically build up a repository of surveillance technologies, or even both private and public in the Dallas area. So this included ring doorbells and things of that nature, so that police officers, I believe investigators, could use them when there was crime reported in a certain area. I think it's one where, again, the Smart Dallas Roadmap and trying to bring everything under one roof was great, but if not everything's going that same direction, it can create some challenges for cities just to maintain consistency and demonstrate to the residents that they're genuinely committed to the principles that they outline in their larger documentation. Oakland, California. I want to say they were the first, but I cannot remember, so let's just say they were one of the first to create a privacy advisory committee. It was established in 2016. And I actually did say it was a first, so I was more confident when I wrote this. Well, lauded as a national example, the Commission's operation has not been without challenges that include disagreements related to authority and access. A lot of that's just coming from, again, when something's adopted, they had a general idea for what they wanted to do, but types of technology, uses of technology, what constitutes surveillance continues to evolve. So I think they've had some issues with the language not keeping up with the rate of change. In 2018, the city also adopted its surveillance technology ordinance, which is considered one of the strongest in the country. That language was strongly influenced and drafted by the Oakland Privacy Advisory Commission. So this is one where, from a pragmatic standpoint, they essentially built the advisory group, and then the advisory group helped influence and develop the ordinance itself. Boston, similarly, just from a pragmatic approach to governance, the City of Boston created its guiding principles and its surveillance technology ordinance in 2020 that established requirements for publicly available documentation, annual reporting requirements, but also created a surveillance oversight advisory board and a surveillance data and privacy working group. The advisory board consisted of a number of city elected officials and department heads, and was an internal facing group, whereas the working group was intended to provide a list of recommendations. In 2022, they did so. And those recommendations included the formation and creation of a privacy advisory committee, increased opportunities for staff training on data privacy principles to ensure that staff responsible for the handling of data knew what they were allowed to share, what they weren't, and where certain data was housed and things of that nature. And then it also stressed the need for community partnerships, both in procurement of technology, the use of technology, impact analysis, but just kind of, I think, an increased relationship with the community as it pertained to surveillance tech. And last, New York. In 2020, the Public Oversight of Police Technology, which is commonly referred to as the POST Act, went into effect. This one is a little bit more unique as it's specifically focused on NYPD use of technology and not the city more holistically or broadly. Just to outline some of the requirements, it requires the city of New York, or the New York Police Department, to provide details on the capabilities of surveillance tech, rules and regulations around the use, including protections against unauthorized access, surveillance tech data retention, public access to surveillance technology data, external entity access to surveillance technology, department training in the use of surveillance tech, internal audit and oversight mechanisms, health and safety reporting on the surveillance technology, and potential disparate impact of the impact and use policies for surveillance technology. This was also followed up on, I believe, in 2022 by the NYPD Office of Inspector General, just to see how they're doing. That assessment found that they were largely compliant. But some of the issues that were noted were that there needed to be a more specific use of groupings. The way that they were reporting on certain technologies was sort of more under a larger umbrella where multiple technologies were used. So that called for them to be more individualistic with each technology, as opposed to just having a general one that might include the use of like street level cameras and acoustic technology or things like that. It also recommended that working groups with staff, with NYPD staff, just to increase the understanding of the requirements of this policy, and then promoted promotion of access and retention policies, and then better communication of all of the information that's available. There's a ton of stuff that was put out to ensure compliance with this act, but they had not done an effective job of communicating that to the public. Conclusion, as I said when I started this presentation, data governance is one of the primary areas of focus, and a lot of this information included confirms that expansion rate creates significant challenges for any effort to create documentation or oversight that keeps up with the rate of change. Also, before a city begins focusing on future planning, it's really important to document and identify what we have so that we know where we're starting from. In a lot of these cases, it seems like cities might have been, there might have been efforts that were duplicative, or one technology that was used somewhere might have had another purpose that could have been adopted elsewhere versus a new procurement process. The documentation stage is extremely labor intensive. Going through and identifying every system of record, every data content owner, the data retention schedules for all of this, takes a lot of time. So I think that actually is one of the biggest deterrents for cities really diving into this. So sometimes I think it can be hard to know where to start. From a city standpoint, I know that Minneapolis already does have a number of these things, at least in some form. So that's good. It's not starting from nothing, but I think that was something that deserved to be called out. And creation of a single database that identifies all of this is beneficial as well, because that streamlines communication and makes sure that everybody's working from the same page. A lot of times, the city will require databases and policies to be made, but they exist on their own within the respective departments. This means that what's being presented might differ in interpretation across various departments or divisions. One database creates one understanding of what we're documenting. And then lastly, as I do often in this, I just wanted to note that any next steps require identifying their respective owners and responsible parties in any specific area of the city so they can provide their input as the subject matter experts for the Minneapolis-Pacific landscape. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Director Hawkins. Just looking to see, don't see anyone immediately in queue. I do want to say thank you for this very thorough presentation. I believe I had co-authored this again with Council President Payne after we took up consideration of the item last year in this committee when it was known as Policy and Government Oversight, POGO, of the drones. And this question around, as police departments like ours are dealing with staffing challenges and adopting the use of more different type of technologies to meet whatever public safety needs they're seeing gaps in that they can't fill with physical personnel. What impacts does that have in terms of surveillance on residents? And this also correlated around the MDHR investigation being ongoing, which also found pretty damning evidence around abuse of surveillance technology. So I know we were approached by the ACLU, which thank you for referencing here, around, what is the city's current position as it pertains to, any policies we have around surveillance, and in regards to protecting the public's interests in regards to any technologies that's being leveraged by our police department that would impact them. And we have been in this conversation now for 3 years trying to identify what a surveillance policy could look like, what options are available, and you presented some options in front of us today, which is a really helpful next step in this, again, almost 3-year conversation. So thank you so much for that. And I really look forward to meeting with my fellow colleagues and more our staff and city attorneys to, again, revisit our current surveillance ordinances, using some of this information that you presented to really think through what are some potential next steps. With that, I don't see, again, anyone in queue. So thank you so much, Director Hawkins. You can leave. You made time.
Thank you.
So next, first, I will ask the clerks to file that report. Our next presentation is going to be related to updates from the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department, and particularly today's presentation will highlight the department's milestones since the last REIB presentation, which took place of March of this year. So with that, I will invite staff to get things started. And I see Director Corbett.
Thank you, Chair Wansley, Vice Chair Palmisano, and committee members. Today we are going to be, my name is Prince Corbett, Director of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department, and we're going to be providing updates on 2 key reports as they connect to as we do our strategic planning moving forward into 2025, as well as a piece of truth, healing, and reconciliation. And I want to start this presentation off with the city ordinance and what is the duties and responsibilities of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department in the city of Minneapolis. And I start this off because a huge one of our reports is about understanding what is the scope of work. And there's been a lot of questions, I think, from inside of the organization as well as outside of the organization about what is the responsibility of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department. And Chapter 21 of the city ordinance is the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Ordinance that defines what racial equity is, establishes the duties of the REIB department, as well as establishing the duties of other departments, and for the REIB director to provide an annual report and progress in advancing racial equity. There is a lot within this ordinance that we are responsible for, but primarily the duties of the city departments is that each city department will be responsible for working with the REIB department to ensure alignment of their work with the city's racial equity framework. Note that there is not currently a racial equity framework for the city, which REIB is in a process of developing in 2025. Each department is responsible for incorporating racial equity goals in their strategic planning and budgetary planning. So we are working with the budget department at PMI with regards to establishing and centering race equity within the budgeting process. And each department shall also make data regarding progress towards these goals and advancement of the work available to the REIB department. So it gives us authority to at least be able to go to other departments around the racial equity goals to be able to gather and collect data. Now, specific the duties of REIB, there's kind of 2 key ones, which is developing and adapting the framework and coordinating and supporting the efforts by all city departments. And underneath subsection 2, there is a whole litany of items. And I'm going through this relatively fast because there is a lot, but I think the key important thing is that REIB is an internal facing department. Our duties and responsibilities are primarily working with all the other 20-some departments and offices within the city to really support those departments with race equity work around policies, practices, procedures. So assisting and collaborating with pertinent departments in developing and setting existing supplier diversity goals, increasing community engagement efforts, efforts working with HR and designing and ensuring a broad-based curriculum. So our team is currently working with the leadership and development team of HR to look at in 2025 what other broader trainings can be offered to all city employees around understanding race equity, racial equity principles, root cause analysis, et cetera. Assisting all departments in their inclusion of racial equity principles within all aspects of their strategic planning. For our department to develop the analytical tools. So we are working on developing frameworks around truth and reconciliation. We're working on updating the racial equity impact analysis tool. We're working on, we just have a contract signed with GoodWorks where we will be developing a training for the repair harm model, which is our truth and reconciliation process, as well as the thoughtful confrontation model, as well as the race equity impact analysis, providing a forum of exchange of information and identification for collaboration across all departments. So beginning next year as well, our department has had an opportunity to meet with the vast majority of the equity teams within the city and looking at how do we bring and connect those equity teams within the city together. Analyzing data in collaboration with pertinent departments, staffing community advisory boards that are assigned to the REIB department, developing in coordination with all city departments, the city's racial equity action plan, and one piece of the presentation around the racial equity dividends index report around metrics connected to the strategic race equity action plan, working with the Office of the City Auditor to determine metrics and measures to evaluate the city's progress. So very high level, but a whole lot in there and really about how we work with other departments. Also included within the ordinance is recommending the report, doing a annual report back to City Council and to City Council Committee in advancing racial equity. And within that report, recommending required around the goals, metrics, accountability measures connected to the strategic race equity action plan, even though it's not explicitly listed, as well as making any recommendations regarding possible improvements to this specific chapter of the ordinance. And I'm going to skip around in the presentation because of timing of our two invited guests. Instead of doing the racial equity report, first we're going to do that second, and then the first update that we will provide is around the organizational assessment that was conducted by Dr. Brittany Lewis in Research and Action. And with the organizational assessment report, I'm going to invite Dr. Brittany Lewis and her team but to provide some context. There was an RFP that was issued before I started around doing an organizational assessment of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department. And I met with Dr. Lewis when I first started and really wanting to understand what some of my predecessors had went through, some learning lessons, as well as because we are an internal-facing department, how can we work better with other city departments throughout the organization? And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Brittany Lewis and her team up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for joining us.
Of course. Take a breath, Prince. Wow. That was a lot. I'm Dr. Brittany Lewis, CEO of Research in Action. I'm joined here with my colleagues Socorro and Emma, and we are honored to share with you a bit about the work that we did in partnership with the RIB department. All right, that's what we're using here. All right, I've already introduced ourselves. For those that do not know, Research in Action is a community engaged action research company that focuses on recentering the voices of Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks into research. We take a different approach to research. We want to disrupt the traditional research process by ensuring that community members frame the research questions, the strategies, and the tools in the context of this project. The new RIB department was really reimagining itself, hiring on new folks, and making sense of who they were. And we really wanted to work with them and help them do that in an authentic way, as well as take a look at what community members have been saying in the past and the present about what they would desire out of the city and the department itself. So that is who we are. We have 3 values at Research in Action. It's about actionable research. We do not want to produce things that sit on journal repositories or for college classrooms to mesmerize. We want to move city and state and county policy, and we have done that in many of our projects. It's about a community-led process. Our community members are our experts, and we should treat them that way. And racial justice. We don't usually say racial equity. Don't knock folks that do. We want to move past acknowledgement toward reparative solutions. All right. That is just me repeating myself. The goals of the project, as Prince noted, it was to generate a historical narrative that comprehensively lays out the last decade of racial equity work at the City of Minneapolis, and to conduct a survey of city leaders across departments to glean insights into their expectations, perspectives, and goals for collaborating with the RIB department. Something I will note is that when we originally applied for the RFP and then connected with Prince as the new leader of that department, it was very clear that the original RFP asked someone to do an assessment of past work that most of the RIB department were actually present for. So we had to reimagine what a real assessment should be and what would actually be helpful for the city and the department itself as they're reimagining who they were. Okay, and I'll pass it over to Sakura.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. So first, we are going to look at the complex journey that led to the establishment of our current Racial Equity and Inclusion and Belonging Department. This history is filled with moments of tensions and contentions, which are much like what's been documented for decades around racial equity work. Methodologies that we used. So why a historical narrative? Through interviews and collection of public materials or documents provided by the REIB department, we were able to piece together a detailed timeline. Our timeline began in 2004 when much of the work on equity lay in the Department of Human Rights and goes throughout until the appointment of Prince and Corbett and Michelle Jackson, who are the current leaders of REIB. To understand REIB's current position, we really need context from its history, revealing patterns, challenges, and systemic issues beyond quick fixes. This historical insight empowered and is empowering the REIB department to approach racial equity strategically, fostering sustainability and long-term progress. So we conducted interviews with people who were directly involved or impacted by these tensions, and this helped us uncover perspectives and experiences that may not be fully documented but are very crucial for comprehensive historical narrative. These interviews allowed us to capture personal insights, identify multiple moments of resilience, and even understand both the obstacles and small victories that have shaped the REIB department's journey. By filling in these gaps, we aimed to create a more nuanced and accurate account that reflects the lived experiences of those who navigated these challenges, providing a stronger foundation for current and future racial equity work. Listed here and on the slides, our key informants that we interviewed were Velma Corbel, City of Minneapolis City Rights Director from 2010 to 2020, and Joy Marsh, leader of the City Council, or the city's racial equity work from 2015 to 2021. Andrea Jenkins, Minneapolis City Council member, 2017 to present, and council president from 2022 to 2024. And Taisha Green, first department lead of the REIB department, 2022 to 2023. So now we bring you all to our key tensions and contentions, an overview of our findings from the historical narrative. The research done to put this historical narrative together highlights 5 key tensions and contentions throughout the history of the REIB's department's formation. Certain reoccurring tensions have shaped its trajectory. These are not isolated incidences as they reflect deeper struggles that impact racial equity work at a structural level. Our first tension: who decides where racial equity work lives? One significant tension had been over who controls racial equity work within the city. This had led to ongoing debates on where the REIB department should live within the city's organizational structure, raising questions about ownership, influence, and accountability. The second, how does the city fund racial equity work? Another point of contention had been around funding, with racial equity work often placed at the margins of budget priorities, securing stable funding has been an uphill battle. Limited resources hinder the department's ability to plan long-term and can create tension within other city departments. Third, what level of leadership makes sense for racial equity work? The push for departmental status reflects a broader tension about the level of visibility and authority that racial equity work should have. Without departmental recognition, the REIB department risks being perceived as an advisory body rather than a core city function, which impacts its influence. Fourth, workplace climate and staff turnover. The high rate of staff turnover is another major tension, often a result of burnout, frustration, and lack of support. This disrupts continuity, reduces morale, and slows down the department's progress. And finally, who controls the REIB department budget? Control over the budget has been a more contentious issue. Without budgetary autonomy, the department struggles to respond flexibly to new challenges, which reinforces its dependency on other entities for approval and funding. Overall, these tensions are not just logistical challenges, they reflect deep-rooted systemic issues. Addressing them requires not only policy adjustments, but a cultural shift in how the city values and supports racial equity work. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Emma, who's going to talk about the City Leader Survey.
Thank you, Socorro. And now I will walk us through the layout of the survey of city leaders and then some of the key learnings that we have. So on April 9th, beginning of April, the REIB department sent out a survey that RIA co-designed with the current REIB team. And the survey stayed open for a duration of 2 weeks. And by the end of the 2 weeks, 46 city leaders completed the survey. And one thing to notice is that when we are outing our survey, it was on the platform of Qualtrics and it was collected anonymous. And until this day, it was still stayed anonymous. So more on the survey itself, the questions were designed to assess the nature of other city departments' collaborative experiences with and their needs for the REIB department. And so next step for the survey layout, based on the purpose of the survey, we created 4 sections in the survey. And section 1 being working with the REIB department, in which we probe into respondents' past and present experience working with the department. Section 2 being key terms for racial equity, inclusion, and belonging. And these key terms are identified by the REIB team to be central to their day-to-day work. Section 3 being the REIB departmental values and strategies, behaviors to apply them within the survey respondents' departments. And then the last section is demographics of all the survey respondents. And then upcoming, I'm going to show some key demographics from all the survey respondents. So here we can see that for roles in the city, we see that most of the respondents are department leader or director. We do have one member of the mayor's leadership team taking the survey, some equity team member, a few prefer not to say, and a few identify as others, staff in the city. And then next character for race, most of the survey respondents were white. While we also have some Asian, African American or Black, Indigenous folks, well, there's also a few prefer not to say or identify themselves. And then next step for gender identity, most of our survey respondents identified as cisgender women, while slightly fewer but also quite some cisgender men, while others identify as agender, gender non-confirming, unsure how to describe self, prefer not to say, or prefer to self-describe. So these are the key demographics that we collected, and now I'm going to take us into the survey analysis. So the key thing we wanted to point out here today is the cross-sectional analysis, by which we mean that although the first 3 sections of the survey are kind of asking different questions for different purposes, these 3 themes prevailed across all of the sections. So the first one we notice is a discomfort with directly the use or indirectly suggesting the use of the term white supremacy. And the second one, we noticed that folks who shared in the survey that there's skepticism about whether the words will actually be turned into action by the city leaders. And the last thing we notice is a sentiment that the city needs to give REAB time to rebuild and reset, given the tumultuous history of its predecessors. So these are the themes we notice across the survey. And then now, from taking into learnings from the historical narrative that Sakura walked us through and the survey learnings I just shared, I'd like to make some recommendations for the REAB department, but also the city to further to the next step of the racial equity work. So these recommendations, although we identify them out one by one, they're interactive with each other, and some of them could be positively impacted by the implementation of one another. So starting the first one, we recommend the REAB department to introduce new trainings that fits the needs of departments across the city. And that particularly will be around core values, definitions, terminology, and how they apply to keep implementing changes that foster racial equity. And next step, we recommend to refine existing definitions for key terms and streamline them across the city. This one comes from, we noticed that over 1/3 of the survey respondents actually have different interpretation of the key terms that the current REAB department identified as central to their day-to-day work. So to be effective, we recommend the REAB department to clarify these key terms and also demonstrate how to integrate these terms into department practices, goals, and operations. So next step, we recommend to reintroduce the REAB department within the city with updated informational materials, in-person presentations, and gatherings. This reintroduction should include examples and possibly case studies that illustrate how REAB can support department's racial equity goals. And the next step, we recommend to solidify the REAB department's role as an internal consultant for city departments to develop their departmental racial equity policies, matrix, and strategic planning. From the survey, we see that over 60% of the survey respondents who are department leads are looking to REAB for consultation on their expertise in the area. So moving forward, we think that REAB department should offer clearly defined options for city departments to build partnerships, and also giving some examples of how the positive collaboration and partnership could lead to outcomes, and that could have be emerged from the different options that the department could provide. So going forward with the recommendation, we have increased staff buy-in, which we have as a recommendation, but also could be a positive outcome of the reintroduction of the REAB department. So by increasing staff buy-in for REAB, we recommend the REAB department to create an engagement strategy and identify staffs to serve as a point of contact for the REAB department. And next step, we recommend to nurture REAB department's relationship with city leaders by collaborating directly with city leaders on shared agreements for dealing with conflicts and streamlining communication and documentation practices to avoid miscommunications and misalignments between REAB and city initiatives. And the next one, we recommend both the REAB department and the city to continue supporting racial healing and reconciliation by directly collaborating with the community, and particularly Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, and Latin folks within the City of Minneapolis staff to initiate healing and repair efforts to move forward. And also outlining a concrete plan to revisit the truth and reconciliation work and take action to realize this vision of healing and transformation. We also recognize that the work of racial healing and reconciliation is not something that could be accomplished in a 5 or 10-year plan. It is an ongoing process, so that this recommendation makes it more important to focus on that. And lastly, we recommend to focus on foster a positive work culture within the city. This recommendation was actually directly brought up by several of the survey respondents themselves. And the need is also reflected in the 4 historical interviews that we did with our key informants. So it is also congruent with the work that's already being carried out currently by the RAB department and provides additional options and consideration for culture change. So that is the presentation from the RIA team. And we also want to thank you for your time listening to this presentation. Also, thanks to Prince and Michelle for their support throughout this project.
Thank you so much. I'm looking to see if there's anyone in queue for questions, comments. There we go, Vice Chair Palmisano.
Hi, I'll hopefully just start some comments and questions. First, I want to say I really like how you framed these initial project goals. I think that's really innovative and it's really important to help us create an outside look into our work that's valuable for us. Thank you for doing that. I couldn't agree more that those are the right and most productive goals to study. I also really liked your framing of key tensions and contentions, I think is how it said. That's also pretty innovative in terms of study, I've got to admit. I'm curious, is what you mentioned about how REIB sits within the organization and the tension and contentions with that, do you think that's more than most other beginning departments that you've seen in other realms of study you've had, or do you see that as being, I guess what I'm asking is how much of that is the product of being an extremely small startup department within a city where there are some very large departments, and what kinds of things are unique to them, and do you think that those things could be solved with one of the things you learned out of the survey, which is the time to rebuild that you pointed out?
Yep. I have a yes and answer to that. So I think the time to rebuild is important. However, we'd be remiss to not mention that in the creation of the division and the evolution of the division to a department, there were a number of things going on in the world that heavily influenced how division leadership, and the department was even created. And it's attached to those things, and it's outlined in our report. So there is the realities of racial equity work as a national global conversation. There's the realities of racial equity work in the city of Minneapolis under very contentious political and social contexts, and how that influenced how leaders throughout its history were able to show up and or felt they were able to ask for the things that they needed. So I'm saying yes and. And time is needed to rebuild.
Thank you. I appreciate these insights. My other curiosity was about, in that survey, I don't recall getting a survey thing. I don't think you interviewed elected people. But do you have a sense of the percentage completion rate? Like, do you feel like you got a high completion rate from those that you asked to do the survey?
Yes, thank you, Chair Wansley, Vice Chair Palmisano. I want to take a step back to your previous question real quick. I think it's also important to note that the Division of Racial Equity originally started in the Civil Rights Department and then was moved as a division into the City Coordinator's Office, and now a new department. So even with the historical context, and also there was a whole previous different government structure. So going through all of that into where we're at now, like I think also plays a piece into that. And with regards to the survey, once we got the survey, I really wanted to know because we're working internally and moving forward in the future, I really wanted to know, we really wanted to know how can we work better with other departments, so getting their feedback. Because one of the pieces, one of the principles around moving race equity work inside of government is listening to those who are most impacted by the decisions that are being made. So the survey went out to department directors. I believe I sent it out to direct reports of department directors. I sent it out through to all of the council members, through ward offices. I was meeting with equity team members, and we sent the survey out around March, and I think I was probably about 4 or 5 months in, like at that point in time as well. So it went through a broad network. I don't know exactly how many people, but I do think that roughly 34 people is a pretty good number.
I thought it was 57, but you're probably right.
Do you know the 46?
46.
responded.
46.
Okay.
I think there was a total number of department leaders we were aiming to get.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Madam Chair, would it be possible to read that into the microphone? Just that the captioners catch that.
Oh,
That 46 people responded to the survey? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you for those questions. I also had follow-up questions regarding just somewhat of the lack of diverse representation, and seeing that it was largely completed by, it seemed, cis white men and white women employees, and how that correlated with some of the recommendations in terms of what stuck out for me was like the discomfort with the use of the word white supremacy, which is a key component of discussing racial conditions. And I know also naming the political contentions that we're dealing with nationwide with the attack on DEI or all things dealing with race, there has been this demonization of the word around or the word white supremacy in itself. And I was nervous of, is that sentiment shared amongst our own employees, where we can't talk about not only white supremacy, but in terms of how it is not only systematically or the systemic origin of the word, and how it is embedded in institutions like the one you work in every single day. And so it was good to see the correlation of that then be, you know, it sounds like introducing new definitions and having to streamline it, but I also felt that seemed to correlate, again, with who took the survey in itself and centering largely not the ones who's been most vocal about the racism that has happened at the city of Minneapolis, both internally and externally amongst our residents who've experienced it too. So I just wanted to get a sense too of how we landed at that representation.
So what I want to say, and I appreciate you naming this, I actually feel like who ended up filling out the survey was a good thing. Because usually those voices aren't sharing and being open about what they really think or feel and feel comfortable doing so. I think deeper work is needed. I think hearing more voices is important, but I think it helps to hear what you just said. There's a deep correlation between how the majority white staff that filled this out feel about talking about white supremacy. And that showed up in this survey. I think that's a deep learning for the council and the city to figure out, what do we do with that information? How might we expand the survey and get more voices, but with who actually filled it out? What did that confirm for certain people or make true for others? So I heed your point, and I see value in the fact that there is an isolated population that chose to speak up about their comfort level, and it tells us something.
Yeah, thank you for framing it. I think in that way, I think at least I remember my time where your informants who were here in dealing with the fallout of the department, it often felt like those voices were the most loudest anyways. So, yeah, it's good to see that it was vocal in this space too of everyone was having some challenge in naming racism, but it was very loud. It was on full display during that time when we were talking about appointments and the ousting of certain, not only directors, but the way in which they left.
Yes.
And their framing and the character assassinations. The racism was on full display. But yeah, thank you for framing that point. Yeah.
And might I add that the fact that you had a low percentage of Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks fill this out is probably directly correlated to a time where they spoke loud and nothing happened.
Thank you. I see Council Member Ellison.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lewis and your team for being here. I was also glad to see the acknowledgement of the tensions and contentions, and which sometimes at the city feels like stronger language than we're willing to use, but it even still, given the history of this work, it almost feels a little sanitized. I don't say that as a criticism, but like, I think for me, I'm really trying to understand what are the core dysfunction with this work, and because it wasn't just about leadership turning over, right? And it wasn't even just about regular staff turnover, even high staff turnover. I mean, we saw that there were full bodies of people who were doing this work in whatever iteration over time, and we just saw full implosions happen twice. And even now, you know, not that I know what's going on in the day-to-day, but I'm hearing still high turnover today, right? I'm a bit of a skeptic, right? And like, just as a pure skeptic, like, you know, without even speaking to, you know, Director Corbett, you know, what I know of you, I think you're doing your, you know, your best work. But as a pure skeptic, I'm looking at the trend, zooming out, looking at the trend, and I'm wondering, is there anything that the department can do to stop the dysfunction, or is the administration, the collective we as an institution, just sort of rotating black faces until we get one that's willing to play ball? That's you know, that is like, that's how, as a skeptic, not speaking to any individual, as a skeptic, that's how my mind works. And so I know that there are people who are outside of the institution looking in and kind of being like, yeah, when it looks like it's working, can we even trust that? And I don't know, I guess it's not really a question, but it's just sort of a way that I'm reviewing the history of the department, you know, which I feel like I was here for a lot of, and then, you know, reflecting, I think, some of what I've heard from people who used to work in the department, who used to work in previous iterations of the department, to people who have left, you know, in that first draft, in that second draft, and even more recently. It's hard to know at what point can we trust that the work is getting done adequately, you know, with efficacy, et cetera.
I see Director Corbett, and I just also want to say amen to that rotating black faces comment. Director Corbett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wansley, Councilmember Ellison. To that, we've been doing a lot of things this year that really has been out of scope of the ordinance, right? So that's we have an ordinance, that is the policy for what it is that we should be doing, what it is that has been scripted for us to do. The more we're doing things out of scope, the more we're not going to be able to do the things that needs to happen within that ordinance to be able to get to the real culture change that needs to happen. And so when I started in this position, recognizing it was September last year, my theme for my team this year was, okay, let's try to get as many wins and execute on many things that we're budgeted for in 2024. And in 2025, we really need to reframe and reorganize our department so that we are doing what is within that ordinance. And the more we are aligning with what's in the ordinance, the more I believe that we will see the change happen. And also, Chair Wansley, we also have Tawana Black from Center for Economic Inclusion with the Race Equity Dividends Index, so just wanted to note that as well.
Yeah, I figured we would wrap up questions around this portion and then segue to the remaining parts of your presentation. And I see Councilmember Vita. But first, I want to make sure, was your comment addressed? Okay. Right.
Thank you, Chair Wansley. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and your team for this presentation. I wanted to just briefly say thanks for the goals. My struggle with this department has always been, what are we doing? Like, what are the goals? How do I translate this department to residents in Ward 4? That could be, you know, we're creating an environment for staff to come out and be better in community, whatever it is. It's just always been that. And then my second struggle has been, it's always felt like the shift in leadership in the department shifts the goals or lack of goals, right? Like, you get individuals in and it seems like it becomes what they think race equity should be, and not really this, like, you know, the slide you have shows, here are some goals. This is what we're trying to accomplish here. Like, this, people can get behind that. But it's kind of felt like over my few years of being here that it's been individuals pick a topic, and that's their personal preference to focus on, and things kind of shift instead of like this cohesive goal setting for a department. We're going to work within the city departments. This year, I had a group that works on race equity and building up staff, internal kind of work group, and they were talking about like how they need to be lifted up, and some policies they want to see passed around time they get to spend on the issues and things. And my first question to them was, are you engaged in race equity? Like, how is that department helping? And they were like, no. And I'm like, that's your first stop, right? Like, that's what this department is for. So it was a little odd for me to hear that that wasn't their first course of action. So I do like the idea of resetting and figuring out like how race equity gets reintroduced to the entire city of Minneapolis. And maybe that's our opportunity to show people, if you are working on a subcommittee or something in a department, like this is how you activate this department. This is how you partner with people in here. But more than anything, I wanted to thank you and your team for kind of putting it in perspective for me and showing me that there could be an opportunity for some goals that we can work on as a council. Like, I'm just that kind of person where I need to see it. I'm not always the visionary, but I'm always the person who can accomplish whatever it is we need to accomplish. So thank you for having the vision and figuring out, doing the work to collect the information to figure out what it is people would like to see happen, and giving us a playbook of what can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, all council members, for hearing us today.
Thank you. And then we have one last question from Council Vice President Chuck Ty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Lewis and the Research and Action team, thank you for coming in to present your work to us. I think Director Corbett sent us the larger report that you completed for the city of Minneapolis earlier this year. I think back in August, I had a chance to read over that. I think it's incredibly thorough, and would recommend to all members of the council to review that, just to see the findings in particular from the four key leaders that you engaged, and how much those inform the recommendations, the key contentions that you lift up as well. So I think something that I'm hearing a decent amount of agreement on here with you, Director Corbett, is the need to, and as evidenced in this report and the findings that you presented today, the need to shift to REIB, Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department, being an internal services department, like internal focused, looking specifically at the enterprise. And what I appreciate about your earlier comments, Director, were just how you're looking at that sort of shift with the new budget year coming up. So, I think there's a tremendous amount of external facing work, community facing work that the department currently does, and it's those are legacies from when the division was initially created. So the two things that come to mind for me would be, in particular, the LGBTQ plus equity work, the trans equity work, and then the truth and reconciliation work. Those are two external facing things. They're both still a part of your budget in 2025. So I'm wondering, how are you thinking about the shift to an internal facing department that really gets time to, figure out what their lane of work is, your lane of work is, and how do you reconcile that with your 2025 budget not entirely reflecting that vision yet?
Thank you, Chair Wansley, Council Vice President Chuck Ty. With that, being internally focused, it's having the relationships with other departments to be able to really think about some of the external work that we're doing and where best does it sit within the organization, considering there were a few departments that are within the current structure that was not there before. One of the things with the truth, healing, and reconciliation work, because that body of work is like really a strong proponent of like race equity work with the racial repair harm model that we do have, I do have a program manager that is currently working on that. With respect to the LGBTQIA plus equity work, like our race equity framework that we are developing will have that intersectional lens to it. And when we say intersectional lens, so that we are, yes, leading with the race, but not being exclusionary of other people's identity, so that when we're building out the framework that has the definitions where we're talking about what is gender equity, what is gender identity equity, what is LGBTQ equity, so that all of those definitions are built in the framework so that the whole enterprise is moving with the same shared knowledge.
So in short, what I'm hearing you say is work is ongoing to figure out how to transition external facing work to appropriate departments.
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is everyone in queue. Thank you again, Dr. Lewis and team. And yeah, please feel free. Next, I believe we have Director Tawana Black, who's joining in.
Yes, and I'm going to prep about the Racial Equity Dividends Index report. So historically, how we got to developing the Racial Equity Dividends Index report is that back in 2022, REIB had identified an opportunity to develop standard methods for publishing a reality of racial equity work, and there was this idea or concept of having a racial equity or inequity report. And when I started, I was reading through what was what was written down, and it was really identifying racial disparities within the city of Minneapolis around community indicators. Community indicators can be median household income, high school graduation rates disaggregated by race, and one of the challenges with that is that there is very limited control that the city has over community indicators, and was wanting to develop a report around different indicators and metrics that we actually have some control over. So back from June of 2022 to January 2023, staff within the REIB department had consultations with the Performance Management and Innovation Department and developed, PMI provided a set of recommendations around the racial equity report as it was thought of then. Some of their recommendations was that it's just challenging for a report of community indicators of that size to be developed by one person. There's a lot that has to be done. So there was a large research scope. So the initial scope of the report was really so huge and really lacked clarity around the report. And then there was no connection to the city services around the original idea of the racial equity or inequity report. So from some of those recommendations was to create a refined statement of purpose to ground the report. And the suggested statement was that the report will inform REIB's annual policy priorities, metrics, and outcomes, and encourage transparent information. It was recommended to outsource to a research firm that centers Black communities. And then also plan for a consistent reporting cycle. So when I came on board and looking at, okay, this was one of the projects that I really wanted to kind of have a quick win on, so to speak, was knew that the Center for Economic Inclusion had participated or had developed a Racial Equity Dividends Index report. And I'm going to invite Tawana Black from the Center for Economic Inclusion to do a little bit more deeper dive into the Racial Equity Dividends Index report as well as our own individual scores.
Welcome to the stage, Director Black.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you so much, Prince, for that. I also would offer my thanks to Dr. Lewis and the REI team, because I think the work that you've just reviewed is really fundamental to the work that I'm going to present to you and share with you on today. I understand that you do have the report, the full report, and so what I'll be really sharing with you is some summaries of that, and happy to take questions as we go or at the end of that. How do I move? Here. Oh, I can do that. Come over here. Perfect. Thank you. So first, a little bit of understanding here. I say I can do it, and then I fail to do it. Just one moment. Thank you. So first, some understanding of the briefing session. So we've spent time, this report came out at the beginning of this year. It was a 2023 report, so the index was taken last fall. And we've shared these results, both the aggregate version and the individual versions with the department leaders here at the City of Minneapolis and then across the region. The Racial Equity Dividends Index itself gives really public sector entities, so city and county governments, a real opportunity to be able to understand how they're doing on what we consider to be the leading standards of building an inclusive economy. But to the point that was just raised by Dr. Lewis, it's important that we first have a grounding on what those definitions are, what we mean when we say building a racially equitable and inclusive regional economy. And Director Corbett shared with you earlier that one of the 2022 recommendations for the city of Minneapolis was to develop some indicators that would really help the city understand how does the work that we do inside the city impact those communities externally. How is it impacting our economy? How is it impacting livability? Is it positioning us as a community that is both growing, it's inclusive, it's economically prosperous and vibrant? And how do we know that? And the center produced a set of indicators that tell just that for the region and the cities within the region, both in 2019 and again in 2022. And this index is meant to go hand in hand with those indicators so that local governments can understand what are we doing, is it working, how do we know that it's working, and specifically, how do we know that it's systemic enough that we can sustain that, whether we have staff changes, elected changes, shifts in the economy, how do we sustain that work? And we base that on the factors that you see here, looking at inclusive growth. Do we see economic growth occurring in the marketplace? Business development, is investment happening in all communities, in all places, in all spaces, and how do we know that that's actually positioning people to create jobs in addition to building businesses, and are those jobs that pay family sustaining wages and are accessible to all communities? We look at human capital, whether or not we see talent growing and developing in that marketplace in ways that, again, respond back to the marketplace, and is it all talent? So we use disaggregated data to assess that. We assess access to opportunity because most places like to use the word access and opportunity, but making sure that that means something to the everyday person who's out there and depending on all of us to do our jobs well. And lastly, the sense of belonging, because you can have programmatic impact, you can even get to outcomes and still have people in your community who don't feel that they belong, who don't feel that they have enough access, that they have shared ownership, shared leadership, shared accountability for what happens in making this such a great place for all people to live. So we consider each one of those variables to be critical in the indicators for an inclusive regional economy, but also then on the actions that are taken place inside a city to be able to get toward moving toward that inclusive economy. If you've heard me speak or been a part of any of our work, you're familiar with this framework as well, which is FSG 6 Conditions for Systems Change. So the standards that I'm going to talk about in a moment and the performance of the city of Minneapolis on those standards is really rooted in having a wide array of different options that moves us beyond simply policies and practices to getting to the root of power, of how resources flow inside an organization and across a community, to getting to our mental models and our beliefs about one another and our relationships in addition to those policies and practices. And we leverage those tools then to be able to get to upward mobility, access and opportunity, and economic empowerment. So first, I'm actually going to skip through these slides that talk about this, and we'll make this available to you. It's also in the report that you received, but I want to get to the results of this because it's late in the day. First, 23 local governments participated in this index, and so we do this still for individual local governments, so one organization, a city or county might engage us directly in a contract, but we also come back every 2 to 3 years and do an aggregate report, so we're looking at an entire region, an entire state, and engaging multiple units of local government because many of them want to be standardized across their peers and understand how are we performing. You all asked a question earlier to that very question of, is it just us or all entities of the size struggling in this way? And so we produce the report 2 ways. You'll see that those local governments impact about 3.4 million people across the state of Minnesota and the growth and competitiveness of the state. The tool is designed to help governmental entities have a set of standards that they can evaluate performance on. So again, very important to measure each program inside a city, each initiative, the demographics inside the city, to do those post surveys and focus groups are very important. Also important, though, to know, okay, what do we have to change that we should expect to see change? So if we haven't done the policy work inside, we should not actually expect changes when we do those post surveys. So we have these standards to really be able to help with that. I should acknowledge that this tool is the second of its kind. We created a private sector version initially and then heard from local governments who said, we need our own, and can you customize that such that it's assessing all of the departments of a local government in the same way that you assess those inside private sector corporations. And since releasing this report, we've also heard from cities and counties like the city of Minneapolis who've also said, okay, in the case where we've got things like consent decrees and other initiatives that have required us to put in standards that might either go beyond what this is or might be a step lower than that, can you work with us to customize it? And we absolutely can and are working with the director in that vein right now so that this can be a continual assessment. So some insights from this. I want to start with the regional insights so that we can really think about kind of how are we doing as a region, and then where does the city of Minneapolis place there. So you see here the percentage of racial equity standards implemented by category across each of the index participants. And it's not all too surprising in terms of where we see local governments starting to do better and some areas that are harder. So procurement, of course, falls in that category where we need to see a lot more growth occurring, both within the city of Minneapolis, but also among our peers. And this is a case where local governments have often relied on federal policies and laws, some state and local policies and laws that have gotten us to that place of access, but haven't gotten us to that place where we've got the impact, where we see businesses owned by communities of color being able to engage as a vendor, having the investment needed to grow and scale and be able to sustain that engagement so their contracts are growing in size. Those that we're measuring the impact of that, one of the standards that you'll see is, do you actually measure not just the spend or the access, but do you measure what's the impact of that? How many jobs is that business creating within the city of Minneapolis as a result of having access to contracting with the city of Minneapolis? So it goes a bit further. On the flip side, though, we see across the state, and certainly this coming after 2020, a large number of the cities and counties who participated in the index are increasing their work in public safety. They've put those standards in. With the private sector report, and I will do this with the public sector, we increase the rigor, I would say, of the standards year over year because we should be making progress. And so those standards go up. And it's been wonderful to be able to work with the city of Minneapolis and a couple of others to understand how of the federal policies, the injunctions that have come forward, caused us to be able to increase those standards. So it's not a one and done of, hey, we got 90%, now we're good, we can check the box. But no, how do we continue in that rigor so that it truly is systemic that we've applied these policies and standards? If you come back over to the left, then, though, you see some other great opportunities with leadership and hiring and culture. We really break those out. If you spent time in the report, you saw that, where it's important for any entity to not only be thinking about, are we hiring people and are we keeping them? Are we firing at disparate rates? But what's the culture like? Is it one that embraces people because we say we do, or is it one where people really feel like, I bring my whole self to work and I'm not successful in spite of my whole self. I'm successful because of my whole self being in this place. My supervisor realizes that. My peers recognize that. Higher-ups recognize that me bringing my full self here helps this be a better entity for people to live, work, and play. So we see some progress there and some opportunity. Local governments, and this is going to repeat some of that, but just highlights it a different way. So these showed progress in hiring, leadership, culture, and public safety, and some room for improvement in procurement. I didn't know earlier the budget piece, but you'll see in the standards some real focus on ensuring that our budgeting is participatory. The best way for us to ensure that our values show up in our budgeting is to ensure that those values have been created by a broad set of people. We can measure that. You noted that in some of the earlier presentations before we got to this section, but it's one that we note here in our standards as well. We also see that opportunity for growth in our representation. Not too surprising here, but while we see full-time employment looking almost on par with what the diversity is in the state, we see growth when it comes to us needing to move forward with our leadership roles. And so in the case here of elected officials, you can see those data points, that will not be unfamiliar to you. You also see that with executive leadership and supervisors. We see folks struggling, as I just noted, to hire in leadership roles, and then we see an opportunity to really continue strong progress in hires and promotions, where we're seeing the diversity be about 30%, so it's roughly on par or ahead of where we are as a state. And then when we look at this, one of the things that the center has been uniquely focused on for 7 years is increasing the number of people, particularly people of color, who are in jobs that are paying family-sustaining wages, moving beyond living wage to that true family-sustaining wage in order to have those pathways toward wealth. This is a unique piece that we saw here within public sector government, and yet not too surprising, just given the types of roles here, that we really didn't see disparate impact across the various participants in the index, across race, when it comes to people being in jobs that pay family-sustaining wages. We've got some areas where we can certainly grow. That unknown category was more significant than what we would have expected it to be, given the data collection that occurs in public entities. That's a clear area of improvement for just collecting that data. But by and large, we've got some good reporting here and some opportunities for continued impact. Just to summarize a couple of the standards in the people category, we saw some unevenly implemented things here. So publishing salary information, this was before the full law was in place, but we saw 95% of cities and counties were already in that space. A drop then when it comes to providing annual budgets for their teams. So we're creating racial equity and belonging departments, DEI departments, at a pretty standard rate across the state of Minnesota. We are not resourcing those departments to have the level of impact that we're often holding them accountable for being able to achieve. So that's a gap of 71% have some annual budget toward this work. So clearly 30% or so who have an opportunity to improve. 68% are following the law before by not using past salary to determine future salary. Only 41% are taking action to ensure the demographics of their community board members actually reflect the communities. It's one thing to say we open and we advertise. It's another thing to say we're not moving forward until we get that level of diversity, not to check a box, but because we believe that it helps us do better work. So that's a standard we've got a lot of room to improve on as a state. Similarly, with having employee resource groups or business groups who can help impact and influence those strategies inside the entity. And then offering hourly workers the opportunity to work full-time if desired. We see this as a core standard to ensure that we truly are moving people toward wealth, toward being able to write their own story of economic success in our cities and counties. And this is one where we don't have nearly enough impact across the state. So let's get into your specific results. First, the report itself. Were you going to ask me something? I'm sorry.
No, I was just crossing my hands for this.
Wonderful. So first, the categories. So you see this report I noted earlier as we adapted from the private sector version to a public sector report. We took into consideration the things that are standard: procurement, public policy, leadership, hiring, retention, culture, and advancement, but then made sure that we also had those things that are unique to local governments. So finance and budgets, the process and approach to creating those budgets and sustaining them and driving impact then with those dollars that come into a city. Community and economic development, workforce development, public safety, housing, transportation, and land use, and human services. So a wide array. I should note, however, you see human services noted there often because we've got county governments. In the case where a particular entity, where counties are doing human services but are not doing public safety, the scoring takes advantage of that and makes sure that they're not penalized for those questions. Here is an index score overview. So overall, the City of Minneapolis score is 49.3 out of 100 points. So those standards are pretty evenly weighted across the platform. You get into more methodology in the full report. And while that 49.3, I say to every entity that I talk to is that, while of course, as people say often, is 100 the goal? Does this mean we flunked because we're at 49.3? No, it means you are where you are. It's an assessment of where are you on this journey, and knowing that journey continues year over year, but we certainly want to see that number go up over time, but we want it to go up intentionally with some strategy behind it about what's most important, what areas of focus are most important for us. High scoring, we noted in the report, and then in public relations, you might have seen this throughout this year, those local governments who had high scoring in particular areas. So in the case of the City of Minneapolis, we see in community and economic development, housing, transportation, and land use, and public safety. The City of Minneapolis has done well in activating most of those standards and really setting the pace. One of the things that's unique to the report as well is we lift those up so the cities are able to submit storytelling, give us examples. What are you doing? Why is it working? What hurdles have you overcome? And we use those to then be able to help other peer cities and bring them into cohorts for peer learning. Some notes, we also do peer rankings. So in the case of the city of Minneapolis, just given its size, of course, you're in the large local governments category. That's a small number of local governments, that city and county and Met Council, that fall into that category, who participated in the index itself based on the demographics and the size of the city. So now let's talk score details for the city of Minneapolis. So here, this gives you an overall kind of picture of where the city's report falls and kind of where you're doing. So you can see one highlight I want to focus on there is workforce development. That gray doesn't reflect an absence of strategy, but an absence of that coordinated strategy. So that's information that wasn't coming in to the assessment to let us know for sure that you answered not sure here. And so that gave us space, given the workforce development work we've done with the city for 7 years, we knew like, okay, this is one where they could score higher, but we need to have that data. And so the department has already begun that work and will support that work going forward to be able to ensure that that data comes in. From there, though, you see great opportunity in culture retention and advancement to be able to close some of the gaps in by implementing some of those standards in that arena, as well as then in hiring, making sure that the department has, or not the department, the city has the workforce that it needs to be able to continue to build a vibrant city, procurement, budgets and finance, and leadership as an overarching. From here, I'm going to highlight just a few of the opportunities that we've really zeroed in on where we see great opportunity for the city of Minneapolis under the both direction of the council and mayor and Director Corbett to be able to move from the place you were describing earlier that was quite painful to hear, I must say, of having to sit as leaders of a city wondering, is it about strategy and impact, or is it about rotating leadership? I firmly believe that you're in a strong position to be able to move toward the type of impact you all desire, but it does require having the resources, the dedication to it, and standards that are clearly and transparently available to all. So in our case, we're highlighting the first one, which is to move to that place of using quantitative data to understand racial equity across the enterprise, to be able to then move toward that change management by bringing in all department leaders working as one solid unit to ensure that it's not one department or team that's making progress and everybody else is getting by because of that, but everyone's making progress and they're making that progress together. I applaud the director for the first convening where we shared this result, had multiple department heads in, being able to talk to one another and understand, okay, what's happening in the fire department, what's happening in policing, what's happening in community and economic development, and how do we make sure those things add up to more than 2 + 2 = 4? How do we get that to 2 + 2 = 10? Because we're working in solidarity and we're using data and rigor to measure the impact of that work. And so that's the first one. I would note here that focus on hiring, promotion, and retention rates of the workforce, as well as that share of people who are earning family-sustaining wages inside the enterprise and then externally as well. The second is to increase leadership buy-in for racial equity. No surprise here based on the conversations you've had. But accountability is everything. At the center, we've been really heavily focused on shared accountability for a number of years. In the case of local governments, that accountability comes back to those shareholders, those taxpayers who are the invested shareholders of a city enterprise, being able to have transparent access to data and the metrics that matter to them. So it's not in such a lingo, if you will, that the average person can't understand how is my life supposed to be different because the city of Minneapolis has invested in doing this work, or they've reinvested in doing this work. It should be pretty easy for folks to understand, okay, my quality of life should go up in this way in about 3 years because of this work, and then be able to check in on it based on the reports that they see coming out. To do this, we think it's important to start with education, to really get down to some of the things that were just presented by Dr. Lewis and her team, so that people have surely the fundamentals on definitions in a shared sense, but then also the education about how does this matter to my job. In any organization, when leaders don't understand that, they could abdicate that to being the head of racial equity or the head of DEI's job. Maybe it's a CEO, or in your case, the mayor or council's job. But it doesn't really matter to them. People figure life will continue to be just fine if I don't have to take on this new hard responsibility that positions me as feeling like maybe I'm a racist. In our work, we kind of skip past that point, that it really doesn't matter whether you feel like you're a racist or not. What does matter is that we have standards for accountability, that we've built those to be so deeply embedded into the everyday work and responsibilities that people have to do, that they want to do that because they cannot be successful in their core job without doing that. So education would center in those lanes to getting really concrete about the actions that have to take place every day in order to get the outcomes that you all aspire to get to. Then moving into spaces that also help people get to the systems level. Because this is a city government, it's critical to be living in systems, but we use those words every day in ways that cause people to think of systems as some inanimate object, as opposed to simply being, what do we do? What policies and standards and relationships and power models do we uphold every day that are keeping us in a place of disparate outcomes? And which ones do we take on newly and differently every day that can move us to a place where we no longer have disparate outcomes? So education centering in that space, education helping leaders learn how to hold people accountable, particularly in a shifting legal and economic landscape, how to go about doing that work in ways that are meaningful, are also fair and just. And then actively aligning those outcomes, those actions, and relationships in order to get to a place that is uniquely different from where we are here. So today, the city of Minneapolis is at 3 out of 12. We would work with the city to be able to set goals to say, where can we get that to in 1 year? Where can we get that to in 3 years and 5 years? And continue to keep that spirit of transparency so that people are monitoring. Are we making the progress that we need to make on these standards? Our third opportunity here is about resident well-being. I mentioned earlier the opportunity to really see our values reflected in our budgeting processes and our budgets themselves. How do City of Minneapolis residents see themselves reflected in the decisions that are made in this hall and others throughout the City of Minneapolis every day? Can they articulate and see themselves literally showing up in those budget decisions? Well, the more that we activate and engage people from those perspectives in the budgeting process, the more likely they are to be able to see themselves in the budget and the stronger and more outcomes-based and just budgeting process that the City of Minneapolis will have. So that is a third area of opportunity. And we see each one of these opportunities as really positioning the City of Minneapolis to not only, again, take action and being able to check off more of the standards and see the score go up, but to move toward those holistic goals for racial equity, community belonging, and inclusion that you've established already, to move to that place where the city is more economically competitive, attracting both businesses and talent in ways that cause the city to continue to thrive while actively investing in its current workforce. And the residents who live here have continued to call this place a home and want to see themselves prosperous in the future. I will pause there for questions or discussion or anything else that the director might ask me to cover.
Thank you. We're just using our flags here. Are there any questions or discussion? I'm not seeing any.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. Black.
Thank you all so much, and I'll just close out with, this is the work our department is supposed to be doing, is identifying internally some of the policies, practices, procedures that we can put in place to help other departments put in place so that we are moving along the continuum of racial equity. And looking at developing our racial equity framework, we want to work with Tawana Black and the Center for Economic Inclusion in developing some of the indicators that are a little bit more specific for the City of Minneapolis, considering some of the unique positions that we're in. And then we're also taking a lot of the recommendations that came from the Research and Action Report, and we are already implementing some of those recommendations, even rolling us out, reintroducing our department to the city, which is why we now have our fist icon. And just want to thank you all so much for your time. And always feel free to reach out for any questions or any one-on-ones.
Thank you, Director Corbett. Are there questions and broad comments, Councilmember Vito?
Just a comment. I wanted to thank you so much, Ms. Black, for your presentation. It was so refreshing. It's hard to pay attention for me this late in a presentation, but you did a fantastic job. Just absolutely brilliant delivery. Thank you so much for waiting and presenting to this committee. I'll be in touch. I have a little bit of a delay in process, so I'll be in touch with some questions that I know I'm going to have about the presentation and some action items moving forward, hopefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there others? I'm curious, though, I don't have my thoughts fully formed about the future funding of this kind of work through your department. but that's a question for later. Any other thoughts or questions from my colleagues? I'm not seeing any. Director Corbett, does this complete your larger presentation?
Yes, it does. Thank you all so much for your time.
Super. I'll ask the clerk to please receive and file that report. It looks like we've exhausted all the items on our agenda today, so without any objection, we will be adjourned. Thank you.